Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to contribute to debate regarding the Offshore Electricity Infrastructure Legislation Amendment Bill 2022. I'm speaking for this bill because the issues of climate change and renewable energy were the top issues that locals in Bennelong raised with me, and ultimately issues they voted for. They voted for a strong voice on climate change to be their voice here in our nation's parliament. They voted for someone to support legislation just like this, legislation that will unlock our nation's renewable energy potential, legislation that will produce emissions-free electricity as we drive down our emissions to our legislated targets and hopefully well above them, Deputy Speaker. Offshore wind is just one way that this government is getting on with the job. After a lost decade of denial and delay, we're getting on with the job of tackling climate change and investing in renewable energy and the economic prosperity that renewable energy delivers. And we know that offshore wind is poised for explosive growth globally. As an island nation, Australia has a coastline of more than 60,000 kilometres with very high wind resources. And with that comes so much potential for offshore electricity. Right now, there are over 10 offshore wind proposals in Australia just waiting to be given the green light by this parliament. We know that offshore wind power is abundant, it's homegrown, provides jobs, and it is affordable. These projects promise enormous generation capacity with tens and thousands of jobs in the construction phase, thousands of good ongoing jobs as they're operational, and billions of dollars in investment. Importantly, most of these proposals are sitting alongside our traditional energy regions, and we heard from the member for Cunningham, who's proud to have her area identified as an area where offshore wind can prosper. We already have very strong infrastructure in place in those regions because of the electricity grids that have transmitted traditional power. Our regions have the most to gain from a thriving offshore wind industry. And we heard earlier, but I'll repeat it, one single turn of an offshore wind turbine can provide as much energy as a whole day's worth of rooftop solar. And these turbines can turn 15 times per minute. Around the world, more than 35 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity are already in operation, with expected increases up to 80 gigawatts by 2030 and 2,000 gigawatts by 2050. And just to put all that into perspective, currently Australia's entire national energy market is around 55 gigawatts, with these proposed projects alone generating over 25 gigawatts. We have more offshore wind resources than we could ever possibly use ourselves, and that means there's lots of opportunity for us to export this clean, renewable energy globally. It's deeply regrettable that all the benefits of offshore wind have been delayed for so long because of the inaction of the former government. Credible offshore wind projects have been waiting for more than 5 years for this legislation. We heard it's only after Labor's pressure that the Offshore Electricity Act came into effect in June 22. We finally have a framework for regulating offshore renewable energy infrastructure in Commonwealth waters. The previous government dragged their heels on getting this industry up and running, and there's no doubt we have a lot of catching up to do. This legislation makes some small administrative amendments to the existing Offshore Electricity Infrastructure Act of 2021 to reflect recent machinery of government changes. It also makes some technical amendments and closes a regulatory gap in the Customs Act to ensure full coverage of customs obligations for new renewable energy infrastructure projects offshore. This regulatory framework for offshore renewables will contribute to delivering cleaner, cheaper, renewable energy for Australian households and businesses. And this underpins the acceleration of energy transition and decarbonisation in Australia, exactly what locals in my electorate of Bennelong voted for. Not only are we doing this, but we're seeing a clear signal to the world, to investors, that we're open for business when it comes to new energy investment, giving certainty to the market that our country has been crying out for over a decade. As I've mentioned, there are so many great opportunities for jobs and industry in our lifetime. Opportunities for new traineeships and apprenticeships, for our local manufacturing and supply chains, for our seafarers and for the blue economy workers, and for those who are currently working in traditional resource industries. Not only do we have the capacity to manufacture the parts needed for these wind turbines, but we also have the deep water ports to export wind turbines. There aren't many places in the world where you have the rail infrastructure, the manufacturing capacity, the skills and the deep water ports to produce and export offshore electricity. Australia's share of manufacturing and supply chain activity in most renewable energy sectors is low, but it really doesn't have to be that way. After years of manufacturing decline, imagine all the jobs we can create locally by creating new energy sources like offshore wind, adding those to our current mix. Offshore wind also offers immense opportunity to produce green hydrogen for export. And in my electorate, Deputy Speaker, we have Hyundai, one of the pioneers and leaders in hydrogen technology for transport. And hydrogen produced by offshore wind directly or through the supply of electrolysis located in port facilities is a real game changer. If we can produce hydrogen from renewable energy, we can forge a multi-billion-dollar green industry with tens of thousands of new, well-paid jobs for our regions. Now that this legislation has been introduced, it is time for us to move fast. We don't have a moment to waste. We cannot waste another 10 years like our predecessors. We're taking steps towards our vision of a decarbonised economy and considering where offshore renewable energy infrastructure may be suitable and consulting industry and regional coastal communities about them. The people of Bennelong supported me because they wanted to see real action on climate change, and that's exactly what this bill does. Because too long, Mr Speaker, the conversation in Australia has been skewed toward the costs of climate change action instead of the opportunities of climate change action. When we have a huge amount of work to do to seize these opportunities, we only have 86 months until 2030, and that's not long for the massive transformation that our environment needs. It would be a much easier path if we weren't grappling with a lost decade on this policy, but it means that we have no time to waste. And it also means we need to be all in. Government can't do it all, and nor should we try to. This must be a whole of economy effort, a whole of society effort. And I'm pleased with the progress our government has made so far, but there is so much more to do. You'll recall in the first 26 days since coming to office, the Prime Minister and the Minister for Climate Change and Energy formalised Australia's updated nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement's our 2030 target. In 109 days, we passed the Climate Change Act, enshrining this target into legislation. But as I said earlier, I'm pleased and proud of this, but I'm not satisfied. I'm satisfied because we have so much more to do. And again, only 86 months to achieve that 43% reduction. This bill will help us get there. Our climate change targets will require an energy resolution, and that's why we're targeting 82% renewables in our electricity grid by 2030. Big part of that was a huge announcement that the Minister for Climate Change made last week, the first and biggest investment from our Rewiring the Nation plan that takes us one step closer to achieving our emissions reduction target. It is the biggest energy investment by the Australian government since the Snowy Mountains scheme in the 1940s, and it's called the Marinus Link, 2 undersea transmission cables that will connect mainland Australia to the abundant renewable energy available in Tasmania. This agreement will support their plan to increase renewable generation to 200%. It will improve our energy reliability, cut emissions, and create thousands upon thousands of new clean energy jobs all at the same time, unlocking the potential that our land has to create more renewable energy. And just in conclusion, if you want to take anything from the first few months of this government, it isn't just that we don't want to waste a day, but that consultation and collaboration is a key part of this government's reform process. We took an agenda to the last election which was endorsed by the Australian people. But in implementing it, we know we need to work with every sector in our economy and every part of our community to make sure we strike the right balance. To achieve Australia's emissions reduction target of 43% by 2030, it's estimated that we'll need to install 47 megawatt wind turbines every month until 2030. This is a lot. Is this achievable? We will try our very best, working with industry, working with the regions, working with energy producers, our economy, to do so. We will act rapidly, and after the last decade of inaction on climate and cuts to renewable energy, we're turning things around.